Alright guys, so this video is going to share with you what we call the basic maintenance for the Bro RC bodyboard. The maintenance is not that hectic, although it is like seriously important. There are a couple of things that one has to do before every surf session to ensure that your board's going to function effectively, efficiently, and come back to you safely with the least amount of water intrusion. Just remember, we're not only on water, but for the most of it, we're surfing in water. We're punching through waves, being dumped severely, and we want to do our utmost best to make sure that as little water precipitation as possible ends up in the housing. Even though for most of it everything in the board will survive. We've got a waterproof ESC. Motors can survive water. With the little servers here, usually what I do, I put a little O-ring and some grease on there, so that also helps. We'll do another video. We have another video of how to seal your battery, which can also cope with a bit of water, receivers in a balloon. But for the most of it, we want to make sure that we get the least amount of water or moisture intrusion into the housing. And the first way we do that is to make sure that we grease our drive shaft stuffing tube. This is a little sponge that we put into what I call the pod well, just down here. Most of your water intrusion is going to come up through the shaft here when your grease starts running out in the drive shaft, and this sponge's function is really just to pick up that bit of moisture. But if we just take it out the way here, you can see the drive shaft stuffing tube there. This drive shaft stuffing tube is a brass tube that's slightly bigger in the center over here than the actual drive shaft. And this end here, there's a little bush, and on the prop end there's a bush, and in the middle here there's about I'd say a half a mil gap between the inside wall of the brass tube and the drive shaft, and that's where we want to try and get some grease in to be able to seal the stuffing tube so water doesn't come up, as well as lubricate it. So the first thing we want to do here is this coupler over here. We need to loosen up this coupler to be able to retract the drive shaft out of it. For this coupler over here, in metric, you need a 9 and a 10 mil spanner. We just snap those, and that'll loosen the drive shaft. So with our two spanners, we just crack back on the collet. So loosen up like a normal nut, just loosens up. And then you can see it can actually slide. See, the drive shaft just slides out. Now what I've upgraded on the Bro RC bodyboard, I've put an extra seal in the front over here. If you remove the valve cap, there's a little valve cap. Just put it aside carefully. See, it's got a little hole through the front here. What that valve cap actually does, it retains a little formal Viton washer, and that Viton washer just adds extra seal at the front of the drive shaft. There's also in the front of this drive shaft, there's a little bush in the front of it. It's about a 20 mil bush. It's actually quite well inserted in there, so it generally doesn't pop out, but sometimes when you, there we go, also retains this little brass bush here with a little flare on the one end. That little flare obviously is on the outside of the brass bush, so when you put this in, it doesn't go all the way down the sleeve. So just make sure you hang on to that. Put that aside, and then from the back we retract our drive shaft. And you'll see when you retract the drive shaft, it'll either come out with the drive shaft or it'll still be in the stuffing tube. It's this little rear bush, and this is the rear bush that the drive shaft runs on. So literally your drive shaft in the stuffing tube is running on this rear bush and the front bush, and the space I'm speaking about in between is this little space here where we want to get the grease which seals the stuffing tube. So if we just put those aside and put that aside. Okay, the grease that I use is what they call a white marine grease, outdoor grease. They use it on jet skis, boat trailers. It's a Herschel product, but you can use numerous different greases. If you go to your local hardware store, there's a million of different greases. Just try and get something that's water repellent, that's reasonably tenacious, and even like red rubber grease has worked well in the past. I just like this grease. It's relatively clean and it's easy to work with. It's a nice grease. It's not that black yucky grease that kind of gets over everything. It's a nice white clean grease. And what I do with that grease is I transfer it into a small syringe. I place it in a syringe, and you need very little. I literally put this is, what is this, a 10 milliliter this is a 10 milliliter syringe. I literally put 1 milliliter of grease into the stuffing tube, so it focuses nicely. You see, this is the stuffing tube entrance over here. I take the syringe, place it against that, and I can see the calibration here, and I literally just push in 1 milliliter of grease. If you don't have a syringe, you can just try and push some grease down there with your finger. Just make sure it's all in nicely. And then what I do on the drive shaft, I just add some grease as well. Smear it around the drive shaft. Get it on my little bush over here. Put a little bit more on there. Okay, and then we just slide it into the drive shaft, just plunge it in and out, so we make sure the grease is, I actually put my finger on the inside, on the end of the, I put my finger inside on the end just to stop the grease coming out, and I plunge it just to ensure that it gets all the grease in there. Okay, so there we have our drive shaft coming through again. There's some excess grease on it, that's fine. What we do now is, the first thing we're going to do is to replace. We're going to replace our front bush. If it came out, sometimes it stays in. Replace the front bush. Take our little Viton O-ring, put that back on. Take our valve cap, put that over. When you fit your valve cap, don't have to tighten it too hard. Like almost when it bottoms out, just give it a little turn backwards so it's not too tight, and simply slide your drive shaft back into the coupler, and with the same spanners you can tighten up the coupler, give it a good pinch. You don't want it coming loose in the surf, and that's your drive shaft nicely greased up, ready to go. Right, so with your drive shaft nicely greased up, you're good to go for about another 4 batteries. If you're getting 15 minutes on a battery pack, I'd say greasing should last you a good hour. You'll soon enough see when you're changing out batteries, you'll soon enough see if you're getting any water moisture coming through the drive shaft, and that's a sure indicator that it's time to re-grease your drive shaft. But depending on the type of grease you're using, you should get about 4 battery packs out of it. I generally go down to the beach, surf between 2, 3, 4 battery packs, and I find that one single greasing is good enough for that, so that should do you good. And this is something that you have to do. If you don't grease your stuffing tube, you're definitely going to get moisture coming up the drive shaft, and if you don't grease your stuffing tube, you're going to have severe heat build up on both your bushes, and you're going to damage those bushes as well. So please make it part of your maintenance. Just to, after you've surfed your board, don't just come home and plonk it down. Give it a wash down, give it a wipe out with a fresh cloth, damp cloth, and then make sure that you grease your drive shaft. Another area where you can add a little bit of lubrication, yeah, I'm just using, I have a syringe with some Vaseline in it. This I generally use when I'm building the boards. I put Vaseline in the rudder control arm. But what you can do as well, just take a little bit of Vaseline and just put it around the rudder control arm. You can just move it in and out just to get a little bit of Vaseline on that there, just to keep any moisture from going down there. It's difficult to get the Vaseline into the rudder control arm. It's a very tight fit, the internal diameter of the rudder control arm and the internal diameter of the flexible nylon tube is very tight, but nevertheless you still get moisture pulling through this. So just add a little bit of Vaseline to this area over here and leave it there. Always just check your receiver, pop it out, See that your balloon is nicely sealed. Always make sure that that's nicely sealed. Okay, another very important maintenance process here is to always ensure that your water cooling system is clear of any grit. You can always check your water cooling pipes that they're not leaking. That you'll see straight away if there's excessive water. It's unlikely. These are thick wall silicone tubes, but check them nevertheless. We always cool the ESC first because that's the most vulnerable piece of equipment here. Then the water flows from the ESC down through the water jacket of the motor and then out again. And you'll see we always have the inlet of the water jacket motor at the bottom, the outlet at the top, so that this fills up, okay, and there's no airlock in the water jacket, and then it's out. So the way that water is driven through the ESC and the motor, these two little pickups, so we have an inlet on this side over here, so as the board drives forward, the water is driven into this, and as the water passes by this little nipple over here, we hope that there's some type of Venturi effect, depending on the speed, that actually helps draw the water out. The temperature of the water will also help the cycle, but I don't believe that it gets hot enough to really drive it that well. But what's important here is that sometimes we can get a piece of grit stuck in our intake, and I've designed the board in a way where the sort of first place I would want the grit to get stuck is actually at this intake nipple over here. You don't want that grit to possibly go through and get stuck in the ESC or the motor. But where a lot of people make a mistake when they're trying to flush the system out, they flush it from the inlet side. Now it only stands to reason that if you've got something gone into the inlet and it's stuck there, the way you want to get that out is to reverse it. So with the use of a little plunger like this, you can see all I've done here, just it's got quite a sharp little nose on it. It tapers in, which gives you nice water pressure when you put pressure on the bottle. And I've just fit a little silicone piece of silicone tubing over the end of the bottle, and that's to fit over the nipple. But the simplest way, if you're on the beach or you just want to do a quick flush between sessions, often you could be surfing in a very sandy area in shore break, or a lot of that sort of shale in the water. You just want to make sure that it's working well between battery changes. What you can do is just take a little bottle like this, just pop it over your outlet, okay, so you're going to be reversing the system, okay, and if you squeeze on here, you'll see there, making a little bit of a mess here, but you see the water's coming out quite clean. Now that's something you can do on the beach between water changes, but it's actually imperative to do this when you get home. Give it a good couple of doses. I even have a little system that I can connect to the garden hose, and if I know that I've been surfing in a place that's very sandy or the water's been extremely salty, I'll be sure to let it flush for a couple of minutes, almost like you flush an outboard motor, just to get all that salt build up out, so that it doesn't end up caking up inside either the ESC water cooling jacket, or often it cakes up inside the motor's water cooling jacket and then fouls the system, and it doesn't allow the water to flow, and then you end up having heat problems. So that's that. Okay, it's also always good to give your hatch cover seal a nice wipe down. Make sure there's no sand on here. Be sure to do this when you're down at the beach as well, because any sand and grit on here is just going to actually damage the seal. The seal over here is a simple 3mm by 20mm wide self-adhesive seal. You can buy this seal as well in most hardware stores. I've designed this board around the user having access to most of the parts that need to be replaced and maintained. So this is a simple 3mm neoprene seal. It does a fantastic job in sealing the hatch cover, and every so often you can also just peel this off and you can replace it. And when I say every so often, I can honestly tell you I don't think I've ever replaced a seal on any of my boards myself, and I surfed quite a bit, but you might either feel the need to do it, or you might damage it somehow and have to do it, and it's a very easy exercise, and I'll even publish a video on how to do that sometime. But make sure that that seal is nice and clean and complete, just to ensure that your housing is well sealed. Other products I can share with you, this is a what they call a corrosion stop aerosol product. I use this just to spray on my motor. I spray it on some of the aluminium parts, I spray it on the ESC, spray it on the brass stuffing tube. This is just a nice little maintenance. It's a water resistant spray, protects all metals, leaves a protective film on applied surfaces. I just find it just stops that surface corrosion. I mean, even if you are using brass and aluminium and stainless steel, there's still a tendency to get a type of a corrosive sort of adaptation to it. So I just, when I'm really in the mood and I want to give my board a good clean, I use this product and it's great. There's also, again, there's many different products in a variety of stores that you can use that are corrosion stoppers. To give the board, to maintain a nice sort of a sheen finish, this is a polyethylene plastic. It's quite a durable plastic, but it can get some surface scratches and it can get a bit of a dull look to it, especially when you're using it again in salt water. I mean, the first thing to do when you come home is make sure your hatch covers are nice and tight and give it a nice fresh water wash down. And then I take a damp cloth and I sort of squeeze that damp cloth. I wipe out the inside and try and dry it up. Even if you've got an air compressor, blow it out nicely, get everything, all the little bits of sand and salt and moisture that's in there, blow that out. But just to give it a nice finish, I use this is a sheen vinyl plastic and rubber care spray. I spray this on the product, on the board, and that maintains a nice look to it. Just give it a spray and then a nice gentle wipe down, and it looks as good as the day I built it. And it somehow just seems to give it a luster, a lasting luster. You will find that after some fair amount of usage, your bearings in your motor will sound a little bit noisy. That's not an issue to start with. They just naturally do make a little bit more noise if they get a bit of corrosion on them. I've run motors with loud bearings for ages, and it's not a big deal. Sometimes I put a drop of oil on the bearings on either side, but to change out the bearings in these motors is a very simple exercise. I've actually got a video showing how to do that, and I think it might cost you all of $10 for 2 replacement bearings. But that's basically the maintenance. I mean, and I would recommend that you do your maintenance when you come back from a session, so that if you do end up leaving your board for a while before you use it again, nothing corrodes you, nothing gets seized up. It's just good for you to know that your board is clean and ready. You might wake up one morning and out of the blue you decide you want to go for a Brofun session. You want to know that your board is ready and capable of hitting the surf. Don't forget to replace your little sponge. It just picks up the moisture and stops it rattling around in the board. And that's it. It's pretty simple. Just make sure you do it.
Bodyboard is cool!